I declare this the second special meeting of the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society's 175th session duly constituted. Thank you all very much for coming to our 175th anniversary. It's a big year for us, 175. Yesterday was the official birthday since the first meeting of this house, all the way back in 1850. So, you're here for a very, very special debate. I'm going to introduce the speakers to you now. So, speaking on the proposition, you have Dáire Hughes. Dáire is the MP for Newry and Armagh for Sinn Féin. It has been since the most recent election in July and has worked for Sinn Féin in Brussels and also in their Dublin team. You have Jack Leahy. He is a history and economics student from UCD and is the freshers rep for the UCD's Literary and Historical Society. You have Tailte McSparron, a former president of the Society, Irish Times semi-finalist and honorary life member of the Society. You have Eoin McMullin, an Irish Times semi-finalist and a student here at Queen's, and also was our winner of our Godkin Newcomers competition. You have David Leahy of the Philosophical Society in Cork, where he is a law student and is also their chair, formerly Oliver. You have Peter Martin. Now, Peter is here under very special circumstances. You see, I've been reliably informed by two of his office workers. It is in fact Peter's birthday. So, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Peter. Happy birthday to you. So Peter is the
Beautiful saying from my fork and the bird guys. He didn't really hold notes. Sorry,
he's the DUP MLA for North Down, recently co-opted, replacing Alex Easton, and Peter is now on his third literary debate, which makes him more experienced than most people in this room. We have Eoin Connolly, an Irish Times semi-finalist and student of politics, philosophy, economics, and sociology of Trinity College Dublin, and is here representing their historical society. And we have Henry O'Riordan, a student of law here at Queen's University and was also an Irish Times semi-finalist. So you're in for a cracker here tonight. Also joining us as our very special guest chair is Durkan. Mark was leader of the SDLP between 2001 and 2010 and was Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland between 2001 and 2002. So I think a special round of applause goes to all of those who have travelled here. So the motion at hand is this House believes the UK has failed Northern Ireland. Now, that is, I'm sure, quite a topical one, and I'm glad that we're well represented with a large cohort from the Irish Republic. Thank you all for coming. Now we'll do our vote on prior opinion. So that is, what do you think of the motion at hand before these 8 lovely people have offered you their thoughts on it? So if you believe that the UK has failed Northern Ireland, please raise your hands now.
Jesus, what a affection.
And those who believe that the UK has not failed Northern Ireland, please raise your hands now.
Very political.
And those that would like to abstain on the motion, raise your hands now.
I find it inspiring myself.
So can we please have a vote on speaker or prior opinion, please?
Yes, there were 13 votes for the proposition, 10 for the opposition and 9 abstentions. Thus the motion carries and the proposition happens.
Congratulations.
Okay, thank everybody, and thank you for welcoming me as chair for tonight, given this is an important landmark in the life of the society. I welcome all the other visitors as well. And you came to hear me today, you didn't come to hear me chair. So can I call the first speaker for the proposition, Dáire Hughes.
Carja, I rise to support the proposition that Britain has failed the north of Ireland. By every conceivable measure, partition has failed our people here and continues to fail them to this day. I make this point and will elaborate on it not to diminish or antagonise those of a British identity here in the north. They are our brothers and sisters, our friends and neighbours. Neither should my comments be considered a reflection of the people of the north of Ireland or our institutions here. I know some of the issues I raise are now devolved, but we are dealing with chronic underinvestment and policy made by those who have no stake here. We are a hard-working, community-orientated, educated and empathetic people. Our representatives are working hard, but we are being held back. I will argue the affirmative to demonstrate how British government policy has failed each and every one of us here. Right from its conception, partition was doomed to failure, as it has everywhere it's occurred. A crude line drawn on a map as part of a peace treaty between a wounded empire and a fledgling republic. Okay. This is my first debate I've heard. Natural hinterlands separated by force, communities divided, and two states on a small island destined to carve a path into their future with their backs to one another, suspicious, hostile, competing, rather than collaborating to maximise our collective potential. The North's sectarian regional government post-partition openly embraced tropes of apartheid. They sectarianised housing, employment, and even the electoral franchise. What did London do for the half-century of this injustice? Nothing. They acquiesced to apartheid. The northern state was built on putrid foundations by an architect in London that either didn't care or passively supported it. With partition and a considerable minority of its citizens relegated to second-class status and economically sidelined, the northern state entered into a period of unarrestable decline. From the industrial powerhouse of the island before partition, the north is now the poor relation of all neighbouring regions. Living standards in the north are demonstrably lower than those in the south. Earnings are between 30 and 40% lower, disposable income 12% lower, and the risk of poverty 30% higher. And these gaps are widening. Educational outcomes are lower here too. Early school leaving is 2 to 3 times higher in the north, and levels of educational attainment are generally 20% lower than those in the south. This is compounded by difficulties in cross-border recognition of qualifications. Now, it's safe to assume that my opponents in this debate will cite the National Health Service as an example of how Britain hasn't failed the north. And were we having this debate in 1948, I may have struggled to counter that point. However, decades of austerity, underfunding and mismanagement from London has reduced the NHS to a weak and hollow shadow of its former self. 26% of the North's population are on hospital waiting lists. It's only 12% in England. Per capita waiting lists in the North are double that of the South. Yes?
Why are all these problems that you're detailing and about to detail Westminster's fault and not Stormont's?
I will go on to elaborate how, because of the reality of partition, because of the constraints put on not only our public expenditure but our ability to grow and fund our local public services, all of these impact our delivery of public services here in the north. When you compare that to a sovereign state with full control of its resources, i.e. the 26 counties, you can see how these gaps are widening as a result of partition and the failure of the British state. Citizens in the south have a longer life expectancy and lower infant mortality than we have here. On social mobility, our neighbours in the south fare better again. There is greater progressivity in the southern tax system, and social welfare supports are considerably higher in the south, even when respective costs of living are taken into consideration. British jurisdiction over the north is bad for your health and your wealth. Now, my opponents will no doubt cite the so-called subvention to the north by the British Treasury as an argument against the proposition. So let me preemptively address that. First of all, subventions are not uncommon. Madrid provides a subvention to rural Spain, Rome to the less industrialised south, Germany west to east, etc. On our own islands, London and Dublin's economic output helps to support the north of England and the west of Ireland, respectively. Secondly, the subvention is nowhere near the astronomical figure my opponents will predictably cite. When the North's contribution to military, defence and overseas spending and servicing British debt are subtracted, the difference between income and expenditure in the North lies somewhere between 2.5 and £6 billion, equal to about 1.3 to 3% of Irish economic output and well within the fiscal space. And that's before we exploit the economic benefits of Irish reunification. And thirdly, proponents of the Union, those who oppose the proposition before this House, should ask themselves this: why does the North need a subvention at all? And why is it in their interest to propagate our economic shortfalls? My aspirations for this place lie well beyond the scraps of the Westminster table. Our economic potential cannot be unlocked with an uncaring Westminster at the helm. Constitutional change can deliver the huge economic opportunities through EU membership, sustainable regional growth, improvements to productivity, and a level playing field across this island when it comes to attracting investment. These problems, Akarja, have all been exacerbated by Brexit. Championed by some of my opponents, rejected by the people here, and foisted on us by British jurisdiction over the North. Brexit was an unparalleled act of political and economic self-harm, led by elements of the British establishment masquerading as champions of the people. It has and will continue to restrict economic, cultural and social opportunities for us all. The mitigations, hard won through years of negotiation and activism, will go some way to stem this tide, as does the continuation of peace funding and ongoing support for the Erasmus scheme and EHIC provisions. But our workers, businesses, students, farmers and communities are now at an extreme disadvantage when compared to citizens in the South. Now, whilst the EU needs change, they will steam ahead with progress in social, economic and environmental collaboration, whilst Britain and by extension the north of Ireland are left behind in an uncertain and volatile world. Brexit exposed the dire democratic deficit that exists here. We are not masters of our own destiny. Powers reserved by Westminster curtail the ability of our local representatives to address challenges specific to this place, and we remain pinned to the British government policy on defence, foreign affairs, immigration and trade. Whilst Britain's jurisdiction over the North remains, practically every sector in our society is looking over the border with a sense of jealousy and opportunity. Our criticism of the Southern establishment's squandering of wealth and opportunity aside, parallel the progress made there with that of the North. The differences are stark and further reinforce how Britain has failed the North. But we don't have to endure this failure forever. A brighter future is there in front of us to collectively plan and work towards. Mistakes, as James Joyce said, are the portals of discovery. Deep in the mire of the failures of partition lies the opportunity to build something better, a democratic and citizen-empowering opportunity to cast off division and unlock our potential. The Good Friday Agreement, one of whom architects is chairing this, I'll conclude now, asks the question, continued failure with the Union or captivating fresh start with a new and united Ireland? Based on how it started, how it's going, and the attractiveness of the alternatives that are open to us, the only conclusion that we can draw is that Britain has unquestionably failed the North.
So excited for the bit I've got to say at the start. When the bell is the mark of your first minute, it's the second time is your fifth minute, and in that period is when you can often interventions. Just hope that's not.
Okay. So I just thought I was making a good point.
Okay, all understood now with the bell? Okay, can I call the first speaker for the opposition? David Leahy.
When I got the text message to ask, listen, we're having this big celebration anniversary event, will you come up? First of all, I was jealous because the philosoph I represent is 1 year younger than me. So automatically I was annoyed. And then I heard the motion and said to myself, I was reliably informed I'm not allowed to curse without taking a fine. So I won't repeat what I said to myself. But I think that it wasn't pleasant because if my accent hasn't given away already, I'm very much from the south side of Cork City. In fact, I'm from about as south as you get in this island before you either get really, really good at swimming or end up in Portugal. This is the limits of it. I have never been further than Connolly train station, which is where I was today. But it was too good a LinkedIn post to give up. So I had to go. So I hopped on the news and I was like, what's going on in Northern Ireland? What's the story? And saw complaints about housing developments, complaints about healthcare, complaints about data breaches, complaints about education, complaints about legal aid, complaints about water quality. At that point I was very not looking forward to speaking opposition to this motion. But then I realised, hang on, all of these stories seem similar. These are the exact same stories I'm reading in my home, 2 buses, a tram, 2 trains away down south in Cork. The same issues are cropping up everywhere. In fact, they're the same issues I read about in Europe, in America, all over the world. Which led me to my ultimate conclusion. And I mean no disrespect to any politicians in the room who were definitely not in my mind when I wrote this speech. The governments are always going to be a bit disappointed.
Yep.
Politicians are never going to meet the goals they promise. It's never really going to happen. Because of compromise. Because you can't get what you want. You can't get what you say you'll deliver. Because you have to result in something. You have to find that even ground and settle there. And that's why, it's as simple as that, there also isn't enough slices of cake for everything. While I could have a massive passion project, like say, the Philosophes' 175th anniversary, I've had to divulge that money to spending on speakers travelling up the country to Belfast. But hey, these things have to be done in the name of compromise. And that's all what my speech will deal with. How it's our expectations, and then how that affects what we view is failure. And that's what's quite relevant about, because to say the UK has failed, we've seen alternatives, and I will mention throughout the speech how the last speakers put it, how you'd be better off as part of the Republic of Ireland. I can tell you for a fact, it's not all sunshine and daisies down there. Maybe if you stay in the Dublin bubble, but when you head outside, the roads don't get much better. And so you head in there, but what is failure? And in my head, and I do it from the side of opposition, failure has to be something special. Because the politicians can never achieve the goal that they set out to do, because they have to compromise on issues. Because there's so much money there, there's only so many things you can be solved. But there's so many more problems. Failure has to be something absolutely horrific. Yeah.
Yeah, so you claim that, say, failure has to be something special, but surely failure can be through the little things, like, say, not investing enough in a region that desperately needs it compared to, say, the south of England. So we can say that neglect, for example, in Northern Ireland is an endemic issue.
Perfect, and that leads on exactly what I was saying. It's very similar to, if we're saying what our metric is failure, is it if you take my mother when it comes to exam season, anything less than 100%, or are you taking me that a 40 will do? And I think we have to find somewhere in the middle. We're saying, yes, can it amount through neglect? Could you have exceptionally bad maladministration that amounts to a failure? Potentially, but that has to be a really high threshold, because there is still good. There is still good things going on in this country. Yes, some things are underfunded. Yes, there's negatives. Yes, there's people who are on hospital waiting lists, but that's happening all over the world. No, thank you. But you need to have something exceptionally bad. You need this real backsliding in the rule of law. You need full-on corruption, or at least not really obvious corruption. You need backside against human rights. Or, and this one's particularly relevant in my own mind and I believe for Northern Ireland, that you need to have not carrying out some exceptional duty. And I think if we look at what the UK owes to the people of Northern Ireland, probably a lot, but what the UK is meant to do and what they've said they'll do, well, the big thing that all matters come down to is kind of the money and the sovereignty. So tackling that money side, the last speakers mentioned how things would be better off funded if it was done through the other 26 counties, had they raised money. Well, the 26 counties have that great system of waiting until the EU tells them they have to take money from Apple. And that money that we get from Apple once every 2 decades doesn't compare to the amount of money that you get in from the UK, which I believe currently is at 90 million. I will deal with that more later in a second. It was also mentioned there's added benefits, that you've been limited in powers. You have to raise money locally. I can tell you your solution of being better off with the 26, where local governments are vastly underfunded and only 10% of their budget has any level of discretion. The rest is all tied. And that money isn't even raised locally, it's raised nationally because they don't trust local governments. So what is the money? How does the UK give money? I didn't really know until I got the train up here. But then I learned about the block grant and the Barnett formula, which I still don't fully understand. What I did read about is a new financial deal that's been drafted. There is additional needs-based money addressing the issues that have been said already, additional oversight for the spending, which ties up the point that's been already how much can we blame on Stormont. This has oversight of the spending, and as well a formation of a public sector transformation board to actively address these issues. And I don't think we can say that Northern Ireland isn't working, as been suggested by the last speaker. Because yes, is there issues? Yeah, it's not perfect, but there's issues everywhere. But there has been drops in poverty rates over the last decade. There has been increases in education. And it was already mentioned the NHS is still there as a functioning system. No, thank you. Because my knowledge of the NHS is poor, but I can also tell you my experience with the HSC we have down south isn't much better. In fact, it's so bad, we send people up here to get cataract surgery. It's called the blind bus. If you ever see it, it's literally elderly people walking around with bandages on, being led up to Belfast and back down so they can see. But that leads on to that second element of failure, which is the exceptional duty. And I think this is the most relevant when it comes to Northern Ireland. And that's why I've labelled this section the Peace, Parity and Protocol section, my 3 Ps, which is Northern Ireland has been promised something in the Good Friday Agreement and in the peace talks with partition, which is an element of support and guidance along from London, but also sovereignty, the ability to make some decisions. The UK hasn't compromised on these as much as has been alleged by proposition. Yes, they've made things I'm going to call bad decisions like Brexit, but they still made a conscious effort to, hang on, we have to sort out Northern Ireland, we have to sort out the border. There's a reason I was able to pass confidently on the train and had to be told I'd enter Northern Ireland, because I didn't realise there's no border checks. The same way we look at the UK has wanted to leave the ECHR, but hasn't because they know it would do too much damage here. Fundamentally, if you want to view that there's been a failure, it's not that things are less than perfect. It's not that some social services aren't up to top notch, because they never will be. No alternative that will be mentioned is where you're better off. Ultimately, you kind of have to work with what you've got. And what you've got here may not be great, but is it still going somewhere? Is there still incremental gains? Have you taken a backstop? Is it all slid to pot? Are the governments in London not holding up the things they said they would do? And that is why we must vote opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call the second speaker for the proposition, Jacqueline?
Jeeva Karjan, I'm delighted to speak on side proposition tonight, and I hope that my speech will make it evident that successive British governments have failed Northern Ireland through neglect due to complete political apathy. I will argue in my speech that this willful ignorance of Northern Ireland is one of the biggest factors holding back Northern Ireland from what it could have been. And how this apathy and disinterest of politicians in Westminster and the continued neglect towards Northern Ireland as a whole is clear evidence that they would rather ignore any issues relating to Northern Ireland or try and develop it into something more better than what it is today over, say, any region that is not just the southeast of England. When we're talking about the UK failing Northern Ireland, proposition wants something to make clear is that it's always that they're implementing policies that would directly harm Northern Ireland, but rather there is a clear pattern of neglect and no political will to actually meaningfully improve the situation in Northern Ireland. Now, the previous speaker was funnier than me, I'm probably gonna have to admit, but he also stated that failure only counts when it's some special disaster. But the truth is that failure is just when goals aren't met and the targets that are set have not been achieved. No, thank you. The GFA set out lots of goals the UK could have helped meet, like, say, inclusive co-educated primary schools, which has failed since about 90% of children are educated in single religion schools. Say, unifying communities previously divided, which is also good, thank you, since peace walls have been set up as recently as 2000s. And as I will explain in my speech, this failure has occurred because things have not become what was promised. It isn't due to, say, malice or evil that there is this neglect or apathy, but simply because they just don't care. And why should politicians? Northern Ireland is this strange and anomalous place that seems so different from the rest of the UK. The Tories and Labour that dominate the rest of the UK don't even bother, are completely almost absent from Northern Ireland, with Labour not even bothering to field a candidate, and the Northern Ireland Conservative branch winning in a standing 0.1% of the vote in the 2024 election. For the powers that be, Northern Ireland is not constituency to win, but rather an annoying stone in their shoe. The easiest and most convenient thing to do is to just leave it be when it comes to policy making. Hope that it'll just sort itself out, or until the problem becomes too big to ignore, and then you have to deal with it. This has historically been the way Westminster has treated Northern Ireland. Yes, please.
Name me another region in the United Kingdom that has been given its own budget, its own government, its own parliament building, and its own reins on the way.
Well, indeed, we see devolved government in Scotland and Wales, but we also see that those governments are either overridden, say with Scotland's gender reform law that was overridden by the UK, because the UK has ultimate control over, and specifically South East London, and London specifically, has the overall power over these regions. And what as was previously said by Dáire, the previous government, from 1922 to 1969, the UK ignored discrimination, allowed economic stagnation and divestment, and failed to resolve the very obvious political instability that divided the state between Protestants and Catholics. And when in the late 1960s civil rights protests for marginalised Catholics erupted, protests that could have just been avoided if Westminster had intervened earlier escalated into full-blown conflict. If at some point prior to 1969 the UK government had stepped in to demand equal rights that had supposed to be ensured throughout the British Isles, instead they let it escalate into the point of no return. They neglected the plight of Catholics and limited any sense of goodwill from them, and they've never ever fully recovered that trust of those who were previously marginalised in Northern Ireland since. They neglected and failed the people of Northern Ireland in the past, and they continue to do so today. And the question is, just why don't they care? And it's because the politics and history of Northern Ireland are mostly unknown to the average voter in Britain, very much like the rest of Britain's colonial history. Unless you pursue third-level education related to, say, the history of the British Isles or the Empire, it's unlikely that you'll encounter or be educated on the very confusing and complex history in Northern Ireland. It's an unfortunate truth that the school curriculum throughout the UK does not adequately educate about Britain's imperial past. And this has been reflected in opinion polls. Our recent Hughes poll, conducted in June of last year, puts the top issue of the British electorate as cost of living, immigration, NHS, and so on. Only a minuscule portion of those polled said that Britain's future relationship with the EU or issues related to Northern Ireland would influence their vote. Both parties know that the legacy of the Troubles and the Good Friday Agreement does not galvanise voters either way. Questions of awkward trading arrangements or where exactly the border will lie fails to capture the hearts and minds of the electorate. So what do? They ignore it. That is, until it becomes too much of a problem to ignore. Brexit was a massive political injustice inflicted upon Northern Ireland, despite the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland voting to remain in the EU. Without any special consideration for its new position, it was dragged kicking and screaming out. And it's been very clear since that very little thought was put into what exactly was going to happen to Northern Ireland after the referendum. Boris Johnson's Brexit at all costs strategy pleased English voters and instead put Northern Ireland in jeopardy. It was only after riots and a complete breakdown of devolved government that Westminster took the problem seriously, and Rishi Sunak's government was forced to renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol, giving us the Windsor Framework. A solution that could have been reached years earlier if the UK had ever bothered to plan that properly. Even still, this policy has been detrimental to Northern Ireland and will continue to be so. The obvious extra paperwork created by having a de facto border in the Irish Sea is evident and will only get worse as time goes on. When the EU made changes to upgrade its food safety standards in December, it meant that small firms had to pay for someone to check their items as safe for sale. As Northern Ireland has remained the EU's single goods market after Brexit, this means it's also affected by the change, despite not having a representative in the EU. However, British-based businesses, especially small businesses on razor-thin margins due to cost of living, have stopped selling to the EU and Northern Ireland as they don't want to breach the rules or pay out for a so-called responsible person who must do their product safety checks every time they cross the border. A conviction and the penalties of fines mean business owners without the resources to get legal advice just won't risk something going wrong and instead simply halt exports to Northern Ireland. This is just one example of how Brexit, even with the negotiated Northern Ireland Protocol, damages the economy of Northern Ireland. This isn't unique and will continue to happen every single time the EU changes something that might not affect merry old England, but will harm Northern Ireland. What solution does the new government have? Will they provide subsidies? No. Do they have a plan to incorporate Northern Ireland to become more involved in the UK? No. Instead, they take the path of least resistance and just do nothing. Neglect the issue, pretend it's not there, carry on. And whilst Norman is also responsible for the economy of Northern Ireland, overall economic and political power absolutely rests with Westminster. The failure of the UK government to effectively support Northern Ireland is unfortunately not unique to just Northern Ireland. In Wales, Scotland, and really anywhere that's not just the south of England, time and time again we see a clear pattern. Regions being ignored, being underfunded, and being dismissed when it comes to their own voice. And while any political and economic decisions are made solely with England in mind, this is not a partnership of equals. It is a system where power and resources are centralised in one city, and everyone else does simply accept it. The UK government treats London and the South East as the core of the country, leaving Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales on the sideline. It ignores their voices, again, underfunds their economies, and only reacts to a problem when it comes to crisis that they have to pay attention to. This is not how an equal union functions. This is how government fails its people. And that is why we urge you to support the motion. The UK has failed Northern Ireland just as it's failed Scotland and Wales, grooming them on with.
And I now call the second speaker for the opposition, Peter Martin.
How long did you get, by the way?
7.
Yeah, just check.
No extra.
No extra for LA. Look, I'm thrilled to be back at the Litter. I love it here. I enjoy the debate and the crack. I suppose before I start, I want to pay tribute to ChatGPT for the speech this evening. I'll pick up on a couple of points of the proposition. Is that right? Proposition over here. I've raised. I listened to Dáire, and I wasn't sure if it was a reunification speech. You know, he focused so much on the bad stuff that was happening, and really we should all get together with the South, which isn't really what the debate is this evening. I wish I could talk as fast as Jack. I can't. He knows more about the Windsor Framework than me, and I'm on the Windsor Framework Scrutiny Committee. And I was thinking, Jack, you've got a natural in there. Look, I would contend that obviously the United Kingdom has supported Northern Ireland all the way through its inception. The underlying principle of the state providing support for people in need from cradle to grave has provided a strong foundation for the public services that we enjoy today. As problematic as has been pointed out that they are sometimes. In terms of economic underwriting, and Dáire made this point, or he touched on this point, I wasn't sure where his figures came from, but the UK will provide 18.2 billion for Northern Ireland in 25-26. Now, there's nothing taken off that. That is there, and it's done through the Barnett formula, which results in Northern Ireland receiving, and picking up on Jack's point, higher per capita funding than any other UK region. So Jack's making the point that actually South East of England, they get well looked after. No. Barnett formula calculates change to the UK government department budget multiplied by a comparability percentage, and we get 1.24 as a fiscal floor, and then multiplied by an appropriate population proportion. That means we do quite well. And 18.2 is a substantial figure for a region of this size, and I believe demonstrates a very clear commitment from UK to Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland does have its issues. They've been highlighted already in terms of economic activity, which is people not working, and low productivity as well. But beware of what you wish for. Other options are available. Reunification as one. But as an economist, Professor John Fitzgerald said recently about United Ireland, it could put huge financial pressure, that's quote, on the people of the Irish Republic, and will result in an immediate reduction in their currently in ROI living standards. Now, if the people in ROI, and I'm flanked by them this evening, want to vote for that, that is fine, and the Good Friday Agreement allows for that. But I'm just not too sure if they actually would want to do that. Anyway, we know that everyone has benefited from the NHS. The proposition, I've already made the point that there are difficulties, and I'm not going to deny them. It's a principle of free, universal care at the point of need. And particularly, regionally, we have problems with the NHS. There are higher waiting lists. It needs reform. But it is free, universal health care that I believe the folks in the south don't have. I think, yes?
Would you rather live in a place where you have to pay for healthcare, or a place where you can get healthcare for free, but overall there's a declining life expectancy?
Yeah, it's a good point. I'd probably go for the place that you have a good life expectancy, and I do. I take the proposition's point that actually life expectancy in the south is higher. I fully accept that. There may be other demographic reasons for that, however. Anyway, NHS, Bevan and Attlee, good Labour men, is remarkable. And we don't have. You think of how many other countries in the world have universal free healthcare. Not many. The UK underwrites a strong state pension, guaranteeing that pensioners can enjoy dignified retirement. In defence and security, being part of the UK, we benefit from a robust defence and security framework. People may not agree with it, but we do have NATO membership, and that is particularly useful, and we have a historic and positive relationship with the United States. And this has, yes sir?
Are the pensions in the South not larger per person?
I don't know the answer to that. A politician should never admit that, but I actually know what the pensions are in the South. I'm sure they're brilliant. The defence industry creates about 10,000 jobs here and over 500 apprentices, mainly due to MOD contracts. His Majesty's government has provided local representation, as pointed out by David prior to me, and it's been realised through devolved institutions throughout the UK. England has, I suppose, Westminster, but there are then, there's the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Welsh and Scottish governments. And the UK has ensured that there is local representation, both regionally and also in Westminster. And people can go there and take up their seats should they want to. There are, of course, issues, and you'll enjoy this bit, Dáire. The Johnson government lied to us. It lied to the people of Northern Ireland. I was never a Johnson fan. Somebody should put up their hand and say, point of order. Your party was, but they haven't yet, so we'll keep going. They lied to us over Brexit. I noted it, and I pointed this out in the Assembly when I was eviscerating Boris Johnson. People I was standing were going, you really going that hard on him? I believe in the biblical proverb that those who live by the sword will die by the sword. He died by the sword. No. Oh, yes, sir.
You were speaking about the budget there. Why was it that the Harland Wolff shipyard, who used to be funded by the British government, had to be taken over by Spanish shipmakers?
Okay, that's a really complicated one. It wasn't making money. Shipbuilding is changing. And we're being undercut by a lot of other companies around the world, and that's really, really challenging. China will eventually undercut us in everything, I'd imagine, but that is complicated. Let's have a glass of wine at the end and cover it all. No relationship. How long have we got left? Unbelievable. No relationships harmonious all the time. Ask someone who's married. Such is the relationship within the UK and Northern Ireland. Sometimes it's all roses, and sometimes it's not speaking in different rooms until one party makes the other party a cup of tea and brings a biscuit in with it, and then my wife speaks to me again. I'm a unionist, but my loyalty is not to changing governments and the whim of policy. My loyalty is to king and country, something that runs deeper than any government policy or any particular administration. It's cultural, it's emotional, it's historic, and it's patriotic. I fully accept that others in this room have equally a different opinion on that and a different political impetus, and I accept that completely. In closing, I would ask members to consider, and the previous speaker said that, the motion is set high in terms of its bar. The UK has failed Northern Ireland. Not could have done better, not neglected a bit, but failed. I don't think it has. It hasn't covered itself in glory all the time, but that doesn't mean it's failed. Okay? Last point. Finally, I've been, as is very mentioned, I've been in 2 literarific debates already. The president has told me that if I'm on the winning side for 3 in a row, he's going to buy me a framed tricolour that I'm going to take up the storm as a gift. What more could a DUP MLA wish for? And I urge you to vote on this side of the house.
Obviously, we've not been there to see how the birthday cake is.
You're worried after coming home and you're worried the kids.
Can I call on the third speaker for the proposition, Tailte?
Good evening, members of the House. 1916 was a time of bloodshed, where men made horrific sacrifices to defend freedom, liberty, and democracy. They defended their country and lost their lives with conviction and bravery, and I uphold them to the greatest respect. I am, of course, talking about both the Easter Rising and the Battle of the Somme. While they are dissimilar in many ways, you cannot doubt that they were both fighting for what they believed to be right. For the leaders of the Easter Rising, this was against the United Kingdom, and for the Ulster Division, this was for the United Kingdom. Both sides were fighting for what they thought would be a success story, what they believed would bring them money, health, stability, and a brighter future. But what the people of Northern Ireland did not expect is the laziness, neglect, and isolation from London management for the next 100 years. The United Kingdom has failed Northern Ireland because they simply do not care about us. When I first saw this debate on the term card, I thought the answer to it was obvious. Not many people would define Northern Ireland as a success. We have a declining life expectancy, as has been said. There is a homelessness crisis. We are the poorest part of the United Kingdom. Our wages and productivity are pitiful compared to the Republic. And even worse than all of that, we have no agencies to change because all we have to work with is a devolved government that has been collapsed for 80% of my lifetime. But maybe I can't see our success. Maybe I've been blind to all the good the UK has done because at the end of the day, I'm an Irish Catholic, pro-United Ireland SDLP voter. So that means I'll never fully grasp anyone really see any good that comes from the United Kingdom because innately I have a bias against them. So I thought for this debate, I'd like to put myself into a different pair of shoes, as I often do in debates. So today I've taken off my Catholic shoes and I'm putting on my PUL shoes. So that's right, I'm becoming a good member of the Protestant, Unionist, Loyalist community. But against character. My family have served in the British Army and the RUC. I vote DUP. None of that official
We need more of that.
None of that official unionist tardy nonsense. I count with my ins and twas, and my sympathies are more towards the independents rather than the Isle Order. 100 years ago, my ancestors and 2,000 proud Ulstermen gave their lives at the Somme and bought my right to be British. I serve my king, I wear my poppy, I bleed red, white and blue. And how does the United Kingdom repay me? Over my community's 100 years of loyalty, what has the United Kingdom done for us? The United Kingdom collapsed the B specials. They got rid of Stormont in the 1970s. Margaret Thatcher said, never, 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 just to sign the Anglo-Irish Agreement, and while the ink was still wet on the paper, she opened the negotiations with the Provisional IRA, who would bring their political representatives into government. Harold Wilson called us scroungers. Theresa May and Boris Johnson both said they would never sign off on the NI Protocol, and now there's a border in the Irish Sea that isolates Northern Ireland more than ever. The late Queen of England herself thought that the Orange Order were religious extremists and called the 12th of July and surrounding months the silly marching season. And of course, the royals will always wear green on St. Patrick's Day. Every step of the way, the London government, the establishment, the United Kingdom have failed unionism with friends like these who needs enemies. The way, and we kind of know and expect that the United Kingdom are going to fail nationalist communities because they don't want to be part of the United Kingdom. But when we see the loyalty and love that the unionist community gave to the United Kingdom, you would expect them to give a little bit of that back. Just even a little. Yes.
Where's your alternative? You say the UK are going to consistently fail you, but Northern Ireland doesn't seem to have the GDP or the economic strength to survive by itself. It needs that support, and we've seen what happens when the South try and come up and take over. It doesn't end well.
Well, my alternative, as in, if I had to, in this debate, come up with an alternative rather than the Unionists being part of the United Kingdom, my alternative would be to be a United Ireland. I do think that's a better alternative altogether because at the end of the day, I am pro-United Ireland. I do think that the GNI is something like 30,000 richer per head down south, and they have a lot of spare money hanging about. So I do think that they would be able to handle United Ireland, not now, but 30, 40 years from now. That would be what I would like to see.
Would the member take an intervention?
If that was the debate. Not right now.
Okay.
But all that the UK seems to give the Unionists is neglect. They go back on their promises, and in many cases they fail to even understand them. This treatment towards Unionists can only be classified as a failure. The way the UK treats Northern Ireland reminds me of that old saying, treat 'em mean, keep 'em keen. Because it seems to me that no level of neglect and mistreatment of Northern Ireland ever registers in the Unionist mind. They still continue with their unwavering love towards the United Kingdom. Now, this is what we call an unrequited love story, something that everyone here should know a lot about, and I'm not just saying that because you're members of the Debate Society. I'm saying that because it's a tale as old as time. My favourite personally is Bridget Jones's Dáire, and I think it's a very good fit for this debate. Northern Ireland is, of course, Bridget Jones, and the United Kingdom is Hugh Grant. And you can probably guess which geographical location Colin Firth is in this very long-winded analogy. Bridget loves Hugh Grant, but he continually ignores her, he mistreats her, he cheats on her, and yet she still goes back to him. There's quite literally 3 more movies. One is coming out tomorrow. This is over 20 years of content of her continually falling for the same tricks again. I think he fakes his own death in one, and she still goes back to him. We as an audience know that no matter how much love she gives him, he just does not care. He will continue to fail her. In the same way that Hugh Grant does not care for Bridget Jones, the United Kingdom does not care about United Ireland. No, not United Ireland. But Northern Ireland. And I'd like to take you back to World War I again. A war we know that thousands of Ulstermen fought and died in as part of the British Army, as well as the Welsh and the Scottish. They were also involved. And I'd like to read you a famous line of poetry from the time. As the poet said, there is some corner of a foreign field which will always be England. I don't think that when Brooke wrote this, he meant to make some political or philosophical statement, but notice that when he talks about the deaths of the British Army, he does not talk about a foreign field which is British. He does not talk about the Scottish, the Welsh, the Ulstermen. All he writes is England, because the United Kingdom really only cares about the English. All that bloodshed, and we're not even mentioned. We're not even an afterthought. We're not even in the league. The United Kingdom for the last 100 years has failed Northern Ireland. They failed us when they signed off on decades of Catholic oppression. They failed us when they allowed our industry, economy and healthcare to crumble. And maybe most of all, the United Kingdom has failed unionism with its constant betrayals and neglect. Thank you.
We call the third speaker for the opposition, Eoin Connolly.
Honourable Chair, esteemed guests, fellow speakers and members of Literific. It is at once both an honour and a deep irony to be speaking on this side of the House to defend the role of the United Kingdom in Northern Ireland. I must say I felt a bit typecast being from Trinity, or to give it its full title, the College of the Holy and Undivided Trinity of Queen Elizabeth near Dublin. Yeah. And as I present these arguments to you, if you feel the ground underfoot feeling a bit stable, don't worry, that is probably just my West Limerick Republican ancestry rolling in their graves in unison. That should be fine. This motion lies upon the answer to a few key questions. One, what does it mean to fail? What are the obligations of the UK to Northern Ireland? And does Northern Ireland today represent failure? If so, how and why? For the motion to stand, you must believe the proposition's account of all of those questions. On the first, the side has told you that to say the UK has failed Northern Ireland implies some level of significance or finality, that there's an extent to which that failure cannot be undone without a significant change. I'd also just quickly say I don't believe this debate begins a partition, because I think we can agree Northern Ireland, as we'd understand it since the Good Friday Agreement, is a very different state to the one that came before it, one which was definitely an apartheid state, thankfully no longer the case. So, on the second, as per the Downing Street Declaration, to paraphrase and quote, the British government has no selfish strategic or economic interest in Northern Ireland. Their primary interest is to see peace, stability and reconciliation established by agreement among all people who inhabit the island, and that the British and Irish governments will seek, along with the Northern Ireland constitutional parties, to create institutions and structures, while respecting the diversity of people of Ireland, would enable them to work together in all areas of common interest. This will help over a period to build the trust necessary to end past divisions, leading to an agreed and peaceful future. That is it in writing, that is where the interest lies, and in subsequent agreements, obviously the Good Friday Agreement and all the others following it, these are the kinds of obligations that are set out to be followed. It's obviously not their only ones, they still owe the usual ones of any citizens of the UK, but that's where it mainly stems from. And they apply, but the key thing is, as we've discussed, Northern Irish affairs are placed primarily in the hands of Stormont and the executive, as they should be. Has the UK's upholding of its commitments under that been constant and perfect? Absolutely not. And the past 10 years have been a shaky time. The debate around Brexit did show a complete disregard for Northern Ireland, and the arrogance of UK politics was on full display. Yet, the prevailing outcome has still been to do its very best to uphold the Good Friday Agreement via the Windsor Framework, and the executive is back. As I've previously mentioned, the UK disproportionately funds Northern Ireland, as it well should, and it is stepped in to guarantee the rights of its people as UK citizens when Stormont, for example, couldn't pass same-sex marriage. That was bought in by UK legislation. And on Brexit, frankly, I think Brexit let down everyone, not just Northern Ireland, not just the UK, let us down in the Republic as well, let down the rest of the EU. But I do agree there's some level of letting down there. Does Northern Ireland today represent failure then? There is, of course, still a very long way to go, and its citizens do not have the same level of opportunities as others in the UK, as has been noted. And many key issues have not been addressed. But why is this? Again, it's disproportionately funded and staffed. We cannot ignore the elephant in the room. As has been noted, the executive has been dissolved for about a third of its existence. The opportunities to reach agreed solutions to a myriad of issues haven't been forthcoming, and most of the dissolutions there are very hard to blame on the United Kingdom. Divisions rooted in the past are still salient today, and though I believe there is movement on that, the parties still reflect division, and as noted, the schools are still segregated. I simply ask you, who runs the Department of Education? I don't think the UK can be fully blamed here, but I also don't think that this represents failure. Because to go down this path, are we to say that the UK should have taken a more direct role in Northern Ireland, that it was a mistake to set it up as it was? I don't think many here would like the direction that's going towards. Yeah, sure.
You reference the success of the UK of intervening in things like same-sex marriage, so why is it selectively okay for the UK being more involved?
That was specifically a case where it's guaranteed they have the same rights as UK citizens on the basic human rights issue. I think that does go fundamentally more beyond involved government and management of administration. And it was something that was previously noted. I was something excited on certain issues like that, where that was something they actually had done something right. What is our bar for success and failure? Is it the bar of Western liberal democracy, or is it the bar of a post-conflict society? The relevant literature typically finds that for every 1 year a conflict lasts, it will take 4 years to recover. By the most conservative measure, we're only a quarter of a way through that time. Accepting all these issues in Northern Ireland that we've discussed, I still reject that this place represents failure. The system is far from perfect and could well use reform, but the fact that the system is in place and continues is a success we cannot take for granted. Standing here in the product of a landmark achievement in peace building that those who came before us would have thought impossible. It is a success that these are the standards we now have the privilege of considering, for there are far too many across the world, in Palestine, the Congo, Sudan, Yemen, Myanmar, wherever you want to go, and many more who would give anything to consider these their pressing political issues, and to fight over them with words, bills, and petitions of concern, and not bullets, bombs, and machetes. So yes, we have a long, long ways to go, but it was always going to be this way. The task for you is to carry the torch, to fulfill the mission of this society and better your ideas and understandings of each other, to build the future that you want to see, whatever direction that will take, and I believe there is a movement going on there, so that one day, when our names are but dried ink on crusty paper on dusty shelves in dark corners that no one really visits anymore, all of this becomes a ghost story you'll be able to tell your weans one day. A ghost story you'll hardly believe. Those of us both in the UK and the Republic will have a role in building that, and we certainly need to cop on in our own understanding, and is part of why I'm glad to be here. I have no doubt that the people in this room, many of whom I am glad to call my friends, will one day be playing their parts in that process. I hope to be there, and I look forward to building that future with you. Thank you.
Final speaker for the proposition, McMullin.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to assert an uncomfortable but undeniable truth. The United Kingdom has failed Northern Ireland not once, not twice, but continuously and systemically. This failure is not a momentary lapse in judgment, nor is it an aberration in an otherwise harmonious relationship. It is a deep-seated neglect, an apathy that has reduced Northern Ireland to a political afterthought, a bargaining chip tossed onto the negotiation table when convenient, then promptly forgotten. Let us begin with the historical context, the wounds of which still fester. When Ireland was partitioned in 1921, the UK did not seek to create a thriving, united community in Northern Ireland. Instead, it entrenched division. For years, nationalists felt treated as second-class citizens. Let me cross out the word felt. They were treated as second-class citizens. Let us not even assign blame, but let us not deny fact.
Right down the proposition bench this evening, we've heard a wildly inconsistent piece of rhetoric. It's either apathy, where they don't care to help, or interventionism, where they're stomping out nationalist rights. They cannot both coexist.
The UK government can be apathetic in certain scenarios and then conveniently step in when it helps their own political ambitions. Those two things can exist. You can be apathetic when you don't care, and then you can care all of a sudden when an election rolls around. Those two things often exist together. Now, nationalists wanted to be part of a united Ireland. They regarded the whole concept of Northern Ireland as a sectarian construct. They believed the only way to secure justice was to secure unification. Unionism at the time was supreme, but it was also suspicious. Suspicious that if it gave way to the demands of nationalism, it was a slippery slope leading to united Ireland.
On that point.
No, thank you. Suspicious that the British government of whatever colour might say that they were with them, but in reality can sell them out, as they often did in the past. The seeds of the Troubles were not sown by an organic and mutual hatred, but they were a product of a system designed and perpetuated by the UK's inaction and preference for convenience over justice. And when violence erupted in the late 20th century, was the UK a responsible custodian? Hardly. For decades, Northern Ireland was an occupied territory all but name, with British soldiers patrolling the streets like an invading force, exacerbating tensions rather than resolving them. No, thank you. The Bloody Sunday Massacre, and collusion with loyalist paramilitaries and routine abuse of power by security forces. These are the marks of a state that failed its people. Now, the opposition argued that the 1998 Good Friday Agreement was the final triumph, a demonstration of the UK's commitment to peace, thus absolving them of the past. But let us be clear, the agreement was not a gift bestowed by a benevolent Westminster. It was a painstakingly crafted accord, largely driven by local actors like John Hughes and David Trimble, with significant assistance from external mediators, particularly the United States and the European Union. After the agreement was signed, Westminster's commitment has been one of indifference rather than investment. Now to Brexit, the political wrecking ball that exposed just how little Westminster understands or cares about Northern Ireland. Despite being the most directly affected by the UK's departure from the European Union, Northern Ireland has been treated as an afterthought. The Brexit referendum itself was conducted without a whisper of consideration for its impact on the Irish border. The crisis that unfolded should not have come as a surprise. Northern Ireland was always going to be Brexit's Achilles heel. Tory zealots had to get Brexit done, come what may. In fact, 6 in 10 Tory party members polled in 2019 said they couldn't care a fig if Northern Ireland split from the United Kingdom so long as they secured Brexit. No, thank you. The result, years of chaos, uncertainty, economic damage, culminating in the much maligned Northern Ireland Protocol, then the Windsor Framework, which left the region in a limbo, neither fully within the UK's economic sphere nor truly a part of the EU single market. Even now, the UK government oscillates between posturing and panic, failing to deliver stable governance. Devolution in Northern Ireland has become a farce, with the Stormont Assembly collapsing repeatedly due to political deadlock. Yet Westminster does little beyond issuing statements of mild disappointment. If Northern Ireland's government collapses, who takes responsibility? No one, it seems. Politicians have resumed proceedings in Stormont following the Windsor Framework, and with this, a financial stimulus package was provided to the Northern Ireland Executive, including a lump sum to meet public sector pay demands. No, thank you. However, party leaders from all 4 parties within the executive argued that the funds fell short of what was actually required to rebalance the status of funds in Northern Ireland. These UK payouts, lauded by the proposition, are not the silver bullet they claim. Let's talk about the economy, because nothing says fun like a discussion on trade unions. Right. Decades of underinvestment have left Northern Ireland trailing behind in key indicators such as GDP per capita, infrastructure, and employment. The promise of the peace dividend following the Good Friday Agreement has never truly materialised. While London gleans its wealth, Northern Ireland is left grappling with economic stagnation.
On that point.
Thank you. It's the youth fleeing for better opportunities elsewhere. And what of identity? The UK government has offered Northern Ireland no coherent vision for its future within the Union. British when it suits them, Irish when convenient, abandoned when inconvenient. It's a place where British identity has been defended fiercely by unionists, yet Westminster shows no sign of truly cherishing it. Is this the mark of a nation that truly values its citizens? The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that the UK has failed Northern Ireland not only in governance, but in principle. It is treated as a problem rather than a place, a liability rather than a land of people with hopes, dreams, and aspirations. When responsibility is required, Westminster shirks it. When attention is demanded, Westminster diverts its gaze. To oppose this motion is to enable these politicians, those who believe that Northern Ireland can be pacified by partial solutions, those who fight for ballots but lose interest when the boxes are emptied. And most importantly, those who continue to make the same promises without any intention of keeping them. What is being said is simply not being done, ladies and gentlemen. They are playing politics inside an echo chamber, willfully ignorant of the Northern Irish people banging on the glass. The opposition offer you torpor and timidity, enabling a British government which seeks refuge in apathy and ignorance. That's simply not worthy of this House, and we urge you to stand with the proposition.
And now can I call on the final speaker for the opposition, Emily Greer.
Díomh Vicarja agus Ina Ella. My mantra, my raison d'etre, the most important thing in this speech tonight will be this. With great power comes great responsibility. We were asked two questions this evening. One, is Northern Ireland failing? But two, more importantly, and the question that wins the debate for our side, who is to blame? I'm going to sell the rest of the opposition down the absolute river right now. So, make no mistake about it, Northern Ireland is failing. Catastrophic. Its status as a first world country is fleeting, it's an economic disarray, its public services in anarchy, and its inequality off the charts. It's a fool's errand, no matter how laudably you complete it, to deny this truth. I've no intention of obfuscating, denying, and detracting from this hard, inevitable reality. But the proposition have pointed the finger in the wrong direction. See, this debate isn't actually about unionism versus nationalism. It's not actually about the alternatively united Ireland. It's not actually about the United Kingdom. This debate is about Northern Ireland. It's about a government that has failed to govern. It's about representatives that have failed to represent. And it's about an executive that has failed to get the job done.
On that point?
I'm going to give a vital piece of analysis before I launch into my argument. I believe this analysis to be debate-winning. The preservation of the Union is no sure thing for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I hate to tell you half the room that, but you know, it's true. And also, the prospect of a 32-county Ireland is also an uncertain reality. But, in either world, what's here to stay is mandatory coalition and devolution. In either reality. Why? Because it's the only proven structure to prevent disenfranchisement of violent proportions. That's the only axiom, the only consensus from Washington to Westminster, from New York to Geneva. It's the only system that has proven to stop the Troubles. And that is why it is so important to hold the right institution accountable for Northern Ireland's failures. Stormont and the executive. No one else.
On that point.
So I'm going to start with quite a valid issue, quite a big issue that's been discussed tonight, but I want to take a slightly different angle. Health. So in 2017, the Health and Social Care Trust of Northern Ireland gave a review. They handed it in to the most senior civil servants. And it was a beautiful, almost work of art piece of policy that had waiting lists and allocation reform and support structures all being tackled. But these changes were never implemented. Because under a devolved legislative structure, the executive and the executive only could carry out these changes. And why, you ask, why could the executive not do this simple job of enacting the suggestions that other people had given to them on a silver platter? Why? Because they weren't even sitting. And there was no implementation. And now, what does Northern Ireland's healthcare system look like? Often these conversations are reduced to statistics and reports, but healthcare conversations, they're matters of life and death. Virginia Murphy was grandmother, mother, and Craigavon community member. She was diagnosed in 2021 with terminal cancer, and the BBC interviewed her daughter about the treatment she received as a patient in Northern Ireland's health system. Although the term patient seems all too generous, because that would imply that Virginia received treatment. That would imply that she didn't spend 3 years on a waiting list. That would imply that she didn't die on that waiting list. Let me be clear that Virginia's story is not an individual anecdote. There's not tens, there's not hundreds, but thousands like her, who have been denied care by representatives who have failed to represent, and representatives who are most importantly empowered to make a change. I'll take that.
The opposition tonight have asked for us to recognise this just after a time of conflict, so maybe give us a break. And in that sense, wouldn't it be expected that a devolved government would experience issues within this?
Okay, so the whole lowering the bar stick.
Yes.
The whole lowering the bar stick, the whole reducing the standard, right? That's fine. Let's look Virginia's daughter dead in the eye and say that her story is one of success. If that's a principally okay thing to do, then I'm fine with going with that. Let's take another poignant issue. In 2021, Westminster passed a series of robust reforms to tackle the epidemic of violence against women and girls. Landmark legislation implemented in Westminster. Only the Northern Ireland Executive wasn't even sitting. And thus, the women of Northern Ireland were left without legislation, without action, and without protection. They were abandoned, by MLAs who swore an oath to protect them. Sinn Féin and DUP and Alliance and UUP alike. And now let's take stock of what the situation looks like. Bar Romania, there is no place in Europe with a higher rate of domestic violence, no place in Europe with a higher rate of femicide. And in Northern Ireland, there is no place for a woman more dangerous than the boundaries of her own home. I'll leave you with this. Don't let them use divide as a get out of jail free card. Don't let them cast away the blame to an arbitrary and apathetic Westminster when it's very clear that power has been granted and responsibility has been granted to Stormont, and Stormont has squandered it. And that's the problem. The most reprehensible, neglectful, and downright embarrassing failures, all roads lead to the executive. It is unwise, foolish, and unproductive to cast blame away for people who won't do anything when the people who have been empowered to take action have chosen deliberately not to. This is the institution called accountable. With great power comes great responsibility. And I'll leave you with this. If you buy the smoke and mirrors that proposition have served you this evening, there's a bridge over Brooklyn that I'd like to sell you. Gird me along.
Thank you to our wonderful speakers. Thank you, Mark, for chairing. Now is our opportunity for questions. So this is your opportunity to interrogate their argument. Do we have any questions for the proposition?
So yeah, one of the key points in establishing the proposition's argument is who is responsible. So they have largely made the case that it's the UK government, but I've heard kind of between the various speakers in the opposition that it's Tories, it happens to be Labour, whatever it happens to be. It is voters apparently for voting Brexit, for instance, and then the historical argument made regarding partition, Northern Ireland and discrimination. We're forgetting the Government Environment Act, the fiddling with the Boundary Commission by the Craig government in 25 to 26. The reason the British Army were deployed to the streets of Northern Ireland was to re-establish a modicum of kind of legitimacy in the security structures because the RUC were seeing a crisis of confidence for the nationalist community. So who do the proposition actually hold responsible for the myriad problems that they have outlined? Is it the UK government? Is it the Tories? Is it the British electorate? Is it the Unionist government past and present? Is it Stormont? Who do they actually hold responsible for Northern Ireland failing?
Once I committed my political life to changing this, it is the sovereign government. At the end of the day, human rights abuses of the sovereign government funding issues of the sovereign government. I'd like to pick up on a number of points I made trying to make by addressing your own concerns. The opposition stated that some things are underfunded in the north of Ireland. Can the opponents of the motion tell me what government department is adequately funded in the north of Ireland?
Yeah, so this always gets on my nerves. The reason that Stormont never gets funding is because the best, most well-costed programme for government that they've been able to come up with in the past 20 years doesn't hold a T to my junior cert in accounting. And that's why that the Exchequer have never been able to give out the proper funding. Because the government...
The Treasury gives money after the government is negotiated, is that what you're saying?
There's no back and forth.
He is my MP and I'm going to need him for my bins at some point.
I can get it worked out for you, Dermot.
Keep your right.
Opposition have responded, so we take a question for the opposition.
So you guys say that, well, obviously, if you can tell, I'm not from here or from the Isle. I'm from the U.S. And you guys say, like you don't set a definition for failure, so that's why the UK government has failed. But why are there so many people leaving Northern Ireland to immigrate to other countries? Just looking up the figure off the UK government data, it was about 23,000 people from Northern Ireland immigrating to the US. And I know that there's issues in the US about a lot of things. So like, don't you think that is an outcome of failure from either the UK government or is it from Stormont? Because I don't understand essentially who has power unless it's similar to the states and federal government. And so why are people leaving? Why are people choosing to leave, especially young people and young workers? Moving to the US, a lot of them are undocumented, I will say that, and causing, essentially just why? Like, who do you think is failing these young workers and these people to cause them to uproot their lives and move somewhere else?
I don't know. If you guys are happy enough, I mean, there's a whole realm of reasons for that. Certainly, global pay, say in healthcare. So we have young doctors leaving to go to Australia because they're getting paid twice as much, and it's really hot down there. And we can't. It's very difficult for us to compete with that. We have a similar-ish issue. At some levels of healthcare pay with the South, although it starts pretty similar, and then when you get to consultant level, the disparity rises significantly. So, I mean, people do leave, and sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's over-conditioned, but equally, and it's just anecdotal, I have friends who went to London, two couples, and when they started having kids, they just didn't want to live in London anymore. They wanted to come back to Northern Ireland, and they said, best place in the world, it's great schools, nice people, a reasonable pace of life and low cost of living. So there are, I don't dispute your point, there are definitely people going to the US, going to Canada, going to Australia. I think that's because perhaps we're not competitive enough in terms of some of the pay scale.
If it is a pay issue and the UK government is granting you these billions of pounds, which is to me a lot in US dollars because man, the pound is stronger here. But why aren't your governments implementing better pay for healthcare workers?
So recently there's pretty reasonable what we call pay parity between the regions of the UK. So wherever you are, you more or less, if you're taking a doctor for example, you're more or less getting paid the same. But and in education again, it's pretty nominal. It's £30,000 starting salary. But putting in pay increases are quite expensive, right? So, for example, I drive on the education committee. So we pay teachers an additional 5.5% on top of what they're earning. That's £50 million, right? Just for that. So that's quite chunky money whenever you're talking about the sort of figures that we're looking at. So just paying them more is challenging in terms of the budget, but it also has pay inflation consequences as well. You keep paying, it's just you keep paying people more and more money, inflation rises, the cost of living goes up, then paying, it's like Zimbabwe in the 1980s, so you have to have some sensible, parameters around pay.
Is proposition to respond?
You suggesting that we shouldn't increase the wages for healthcare workers?
No, I just said that the education minister just offered 5.5% to teachers. I was just simply making the point that's quite expensive at the cost of 50 million, and they deserve that. But government and politics is really just about opportunity cost and economics. So we could not pay that 50 million pounds to teachers, and instead we could get some more speech and language therapists, some more doctors, some more educational psychologists, and not give them that. It's just how you decide to spend money, and then what you don't do having spent the money, if you understand what I'm talking about. So I agree. But when you're dealing with a set financial budget, it's about choices. It's what you want. You want more doctors, you want more teachers, you want some more policemen. You know, you paid your money, you take your chance, you know.
Does the proposition want to say anything else before on this? Or we can move to abstain?
At the start, the contribution said parity was more or less equivalent across the region. I think more or less was doing a lot of work in that sense.
Well, we get, no, that is fair. We get significantly more over here. No.
See, I have to let him run.
I know. You can be fair and everything.
I am glad though that you've, Peter has announced just before this debate that he's giving his pay rise, donating it all to the Dermot Hamill Benevolent Fund.
I think it's all workers.
Two staffers here, probably more than you do.
Okay, now it's time for an abstaining question. So this is a question put fairly to both sides. Now, just in case anyone mishears that, that's a question put fairly to both sides. Now, I wasn't going to offer this threat, but I found myself a microphone beside me. So if the question opens with, this is more for the proposition, or this is more for the opposition, I've learned recently that I'm very good at chucking these things. So you may find one flying towards you if you fail to listen to those very clear instructions. So do we have an abstaining question?
There have been an awful lot of different things kind of thrown up during this debate, some of which kind of touch on Northern Ireland would be better off in a United Ireland. A lot of it saying Northern Ireland is safer in the UK. There was stuff on the executive which is kind of a different debate than this one. But across the board there seems to be a consensus that Northern Ireland isn't succeeding. Either Northern Ireland is an outright failure, or it's an outright, not exactly failure, but not really success. It's kind of doing grand and it's early on in the peace process, so we're kind of just making our way to 80 years old grand. What does success, what's a successful Northern Ireland look like, and how do we get it? Because this has been, on the whole, for someone living in Northern Ireland, quite a depressing debate of things are quite bad and could be an awful lot worse, or things are as bad as they're going to get and aren't really going to get better unless something drastic changes in demographics in the next 20 years. What is a successful Northern Ireland, and how do we get there, and who helps with it?
This is this is one tangent per each side. So proposition respond, who wants to go for it?
I've already spoken to the debate. Unless
Well, I would say that if it was a successful Northern Ireland, there would have to be, people would have to be better off, there would have to be better healthcare, there would have to be stability. You'd have to believe that Stormont wasn't just going to collapse overnight, and there would also have to be a hope for a brighter future, because right now we just kind of think about Brexit and with the way that the UK government's going, it just seems like, we're just going to get worse and worse and worse. I think for the time being, it would have to be that the UK gives more to Stormont, and Stormont continues to be working as it is now, and that would lead to some sort of successful Northern Ireland, but as the UK is acting right now, it is failing it.
Opposition?
To give my very informed what a good life in Northern Ireland would be. I have to agree with a lot of what the Proposition said. It's where you have a functioning government, where this thing can exist, you don't think it's going to shut down in the morning. And it's one that has a lot of sovereignty, has the capacity to make decisions, but probably still has that guiding hand from somewhere. And I'm not necessarily going to say that it lies with the Union or lies with the United Ireland, because I think either way you're going to have some element of compromise. Northern Ireland is kind of, this might not get me invited back, and the debate over, it's kind of an inorganic country. It exists kind of as a result of compromise, as a result of people that didn't want to live with each other, having to live with each other and getting stuck with it because they couldn't agree to be separate or couldn't agree to be separate or together. So you have a happy Northern Ireland, one where it gets enough funding, gets its public services, is probably one that will lead to more down its level. And I think that that's where it has to go. It has to be a point where a compromise is more settled, where people are more happy to live in that, because they're given trust not only from the UK, but also they can trust in their own systems. But to leave a slightly more positive note, Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is success in a lot of things. And one of the most important things, again, very much from a South Cork perspective, is Donegal. So Donegal doesn't have a train station. And Donegal always complains because it doesn't have a train station. And it can never get a train station because of Northern Ireland. So for all the people out there who have had to sit through Irish exams and risk the Donegal accents coming on in Osquelga, we thank you. So if anything, then it's a success in Northern Ireland. I think Northern Ireland is one that stops coming off my train station. But it's one where people are happy. Simple as that.
Yes.
One where you're happy where you live. And Donegal has to I spent hours on a train today.
David, you are somebody sitting at the table with Donegal woman on it.
She can't get me by train. I'm saying.
That's our bar for success.
It seems like an anti-Donegal hate speech.
Alright.
Let's not go to war. We're doing okay. Let's not go to war.
Martin, do you have something?
You were placing that better than
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening all. First, what a great pleasure it is to watch you all interacting, having a lot of laughs and learning from each other. It goes without saying, David and I, as the old citizens here, also very impressed you got Mark to come and chair this distinguished event, someone who's had a very distinguished career bringing people together over many years. I want to try and inject finally a little bit of optimism against what Tom said. I'm the outsider here. I'm the one who lived overseas for over 30 years, and I chose to come back and live here because Northern Ireland is a superb place to live in terms of the quality of life and the value for money. Only a brief side story, I promise. You know, when God created the world, his deputy said on day 6, what happened here? By the way, he was from Dublin. He said, Hong Kong, my God, one's a swamp, the other's a rock with nothing on it. What happened? He said, this place you're going to call Northern Ireland, it has everything. It doesn't have any earthquakes, doesn't have any tsunamis, it has plenty of food, water, pretty benign climate. Brilliant. God turned to him and said, you haven't seen the politicians I'm going to put there. Sorry, politicians. But you're the people who are voting them in. I'm trying to say this with a bit of levity and a bit of optimism. That all the essential ingredients are here to make this an outstanding place for your children, your children's children to live in. So after 175 years, look ahead 75 years, what could this place look like in 2200? Think about that. And by the way, put it in the next edition of the Litterific book. Coming out shortly. My question is, either side, I'd be interested in hearing your comments. Should I be a glass full guy from Northern Ireland, or should I just sit the hell up and shut the hell up and be gloomy?
It should just be those two counties, Mark.
Low quick response to that proposition.
Look, without question, you've made immeasurable progress, and due to actually your flippant but non-flooring description of politicians, due largely to our own hard graft here. Like the difficult decisions taken through the peace process, taken through devolution, and even working in the executive to this day, is done by the people here, duly elected by the electorate. We will have difficult conversations between Sinn Féin and DUP, between the SF and the NICE, the whole lot, but that is organic, and friction is good in politics because it drives ideas. We are being held back. That is my assessment, that is my narrative in respect of the situation here, and it is borne out by fact. Regions neighbouring us with different degrees of autonomy have gone down. And to just get back at the opponents of the motion, you can't be a little bit sovereign, or you're sovereign or you're not. You know, those things are complete. And we do not have sovereignty anymore. We do not determine our own financial situation, we do not determine our own fiscal powers, our foreign policy, etc., etc. But I have the greatest confidence in the capacity of people from this wee corner of the island to work together, as I said in my opening statement, beyond excellent, beyond excellence in community development and in our engagements with each other, very intelligent, very open, incredibly hardworking. And the reason our productivity level is down is not because we're lazy, far from it. It's because the infrastructure around us, in order to fuel proper productivity, which is education, which is wraparound services, which is public services, and infrastructure, is missing. And that's missing because we don't have the dough, we don't have the dough because of the union. Therefore, the motion passes.
Quick response from the opposition.
Like, partially also responding to the question from earlier, like I would agree on optimism in it, because like particularly when the election happened in the United States, one of the friends of mine, apologies, were asking me like what I thought about that, because every country has their own situation and the problems to deal with, and I think there is definitely something unique about what this place has experienced. But like with any place, where it's always a work in progress. Or if we go back, like to my friends in America, said, "Oh, so you're worried that your nearly apparently perfectly crafted democracy is descending into a theocracy that has no respect for your rights." First time, go back 50 years in the Republic. You had like complete disrespect for the concept of women as human beings, and we've gone very significantly forward on that. And I understand the lovely cautious optimism I displayed in the speech. There's certainly plenty of complexities lying beneath that. But this is a mark of progress. And I think it is one of the best achievements in peacemaking ever since, because unfortunately the United States and Britain suddenly forgot how to do peace building after it. But I do think that this place in particular, is the reason why I love coming here, is that it does represent that kind of change and what that future is looking like, where people are discussing these things, where the divisions that are currently, because they are very salient and very deep-rooted in history, that one day they do not matter anymore, and it is just governing the place for the sake of its own future. And these are long series of platitudes, but it is because when you're in the middle of this divisiveness, just as with people in the middle of troubles, it is nearly impossible to see a way that you actually get out of that, and yet here we are.
Thank you, very, very encouraging.
All right, our debate is finished. Now is just time for our vote. This is not who you agree with. This is our vote on speaker abilities. This is who you believe out of these 8 wonderful people. I'm asking you which side spoke best. So if you believe our friends on the proposition spoke best, raise your hands now. So one more time.
Did you vote? You did originally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're new as well.
And those on the opposition, if you believe those spoke best.
We'll vote for ourselves.
I will just leave the number after that.
And if you'd like to abstain on the motion.
Wow.
Build a bigger fence.
Mr. Secretary, can we have the vote on speaker ability?
Yeah, there were 7 votes for the proposition, 12 votes for the opposition, and 15 abstentions. So the motion falls. Therefore, Peter must install tricolour.
Talking point, Dermot. Your guys are just down the hall.
Perfectly conscious happy.
Thank you very much, folks, for coming. It's been a wonderful 175th birthday. So from this 175 to the next one, I hope we have many more debates like this. To stand in the shoes of people like Eoin McCann, Thomas Sinclair, Sheila Murnahan, E.L. Godkin, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to the rest of the debates this year. And if you have enjoyed listening to people with southern accents speak on debates, we have the debate of all debates for you, the Irish Times debate final, happening on the 28th of February in Elmwood Hall, where you will see 12 of some of the best debaters on this island clash over the motion "This House believes dialogue is dead." It'll be chaired by Lady Chief Justice Siobhan Keegan, and we'll also have, should be a wonderful debate, and if you really want you can wear black tie to it. We also have, Daniel, remind me of the date, the continuing the SDLP leader theme, have the SDLP leader Claire Hanna coming to us.
19th of February.
Which of February?
19th.
The 19th of February. Where is that going to be?
That's at the Old McMullin Hall.
The Old McMullin Hall in the music building. And Ryan or something.
There may also be a former Prime Minister who's going to address the society at some point. We won't go into the details just yet.
Yeah, well, we'll keep that under the hats for now.
Oh, I'd just like to say, anyone interested in speaking on next week's debate, the Southwood means test the NHS, please come to me after the debate or in the pub tonight and let me know. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I don't mean to intervene twice, but I just think as a trustee, and I can occasionally butt in, we have the honour of Mark being here, talking about a subject that's very close to his heart, which he still articulates many positive thoughts. Could we call on him to make a few closing remarks on his observation? Of the debate? You thought you were having a free night?
Yeah, I thought I was going to be happy on Peter's birthday. I won't say too much. I really enjoyed the debate, some of the arguments. I thought it was interesting how each side, in many ways, decided to rate each other's cupboard in terms of some of the arguments that they wanted to make. It was started to wonder whose side was who at the stage in terms of some areas. But that's the whole course of our politics over the past few decades has been in some ways a bit of a slow valley as people have moved their arguments and their understanding, and other people have moved and developed some of theirs in response. As well as having served as Deputy First Minister, I served before that as Finance Minister in the First Age. So whenever people started talking about things like the Parliament formula, pensions, as well as talking about negotiations to the Good Friday Agreement, and then Brexit, and I thought about different aspects that I've been involved in, either here in negotiations or subsequently in Westminster around Brexit. I could feel quite a number of facial tics pulsating across my countenance as some of those are back. So I'm not going to get back into those. When I was Minister of Finance, I used the Parliament standard introduction was I'm Minister of Finance. I don't suffer from depression, but I am a carrier. I was reminded of that when a lot of the different problems and frustrations were upcast tonight on both sides of the debate. The important thing about tonight was that both sides, whatever the argument about failure and how they measured failure, what level of indictment or criticism or frustration people expressed, how far it was at the British government, how far it was at politicians here, or maybe the body politic and democratic will more widely. What came through as well was an appetite and an ambition for success. People want better than what we have, better than what we've known. You're a generation that can help to make that happen. And you do that on your terms, in your time, according to your rights, according to your genius. Don't be bound by all the thinking and the hang-ups and the hangovers of my generation and things we achieved and we did. Yes, but some of what we did were for reasons that worked then and were right then. Some of those reasons still stand. Some of those reasons have been well overtaken by events and experience. So you have the right to write your own script and set your own agenda and set your own questions. You flash some of them up tonight. Don't stop questioning. Don't stop with the ideas and keep going forward.
And just last from me, we will also be going to Lavery's after this, so if anyone wants a pint, you're very welcome to join us, but thank you. We also have use of the room until we finish the wine.
Can we get as far as that?
Well, and Matthew, slow down. But thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your night.